And welcome to this online gathering with Mormons Building Bridges. I'm Rebecca, I'm hosting tonight, and we have some wonderful people here with us to share a story of a Fifth Sunday meeting they did in their ward. We have Bishop Briscoe, and we have Dan and Jena and Ann, so we'll hear from them. Just to give you all kind of an overview of what these meetings are, this is our second online gathering. And the purpose of them is for us to be able to hear from people who have done things in their wards or stakes to make their wards or stakes places where LGBTQ people can thrive. So sometimes that will be hearing from people who have done Fifth Sunday meetings. Other times it might be a Sunday school or FHE for LGBTQ. It could be as simple as sharing their testimony that's LGBTQ affirming, anything that helps us to make the church a place where LGBTQ people are affirmed and can thrive. So anyways, tonight we'll hear about this Fifth Sunday meeting. So we're going to start out with Dan and then Bishop Briscoe, and they'll both be telling us a little bit about how this meeting came about. And then we'll hear from Jena and Ann, who were two of the speakers at the meeting. And then we'll follow that up with time for questions. So our hope is that this will give a chance for all of us to learn from these individuals how we could do something similar in our wards and stakes in our areas. So please feel free to ask any questions you have that will help us learn more about it and hopefully help us to be able to do the same kinds of things in our areas. So with that, I'll turn the time over to you, Dan, for tell us a little bit about how this got started.
Okay. Well, I thought I'd start when our ward was realigned and Bishop Briscoe became my bishop. His wife, Christine, took the chance to sit down with me in the choir seats one day, and she told me she was a safe person and one of her best friends in the ward was gay. So, and I also got that message from Bishop Briscoe early on that they were affirming and safe. And I got a calling. I've been in the music for years, but I also got called to be the Sunday school president. And I went to Bishop Briscoe and told him my stand on gay marriage. And he said, the church is partway there. They already acknowledge you're born that way. So he's made it very safe and affirming. And all I did was to get the ball rolling on this meeting that we have the 5th Sunday of July was I was sent an email from Affirmation detailing what was available for leaders, the free sessions for leaders in Provo, and I forwarded it. I don't know, it took a lot of courage to do that, but the email was already written, the graphics were there. It was just a matter of forwarding it. And I sent it to Bishop Briscoe and to a member of the stake presidency. And they both quickly responded. And Bishop Briscoe said he was busy that morning, but he would try to go to one session, which was amazing, the effort that he went to. And then he didn't get back to me. He just brought up the subject in June at a Fifth Sunday lesson and told about his experience at Affirmation. And so anyway, that's my part of the story until I offered to be part of the July meeting.
Wonderful.
So are you ready to continue?
Go for it.
I got an email from Dan, and I'd heard good things about affirmation, and I made arrangements to go to the first session for LDS clergy. Room was quite full. Jena Peterson spoke. Tom Christofferson spoke. A stake president from Bountiful spoke, whose name I forget. It was a moving meeting. The Spirit was strong, and the Holy Spirit was present. They discussed what people have done. Tom Christofferson said, well, some people do firesides or an afternoon after church, he said, and that's okay. But he said his concern with those types of programs is you only get the believers. And that if at all possible, if you can get a bishop who'll say, this is an important enough topic for us to discuss, that we will do a fifth Sunday, then you get the entire ward, which is what I wanted. There were two things that, well, I was concerned as a bishop that giving temple interviews, when I got to question 7 about whether or not you follow or support an individual or a group whose teachings or practices are contrary to those practiced by the LDS Church, that 2 individuals in 2 years asked me. One sister said, I have a gay son. Does that mean I can't go to the temple? Another sister said, well, am I in conflict with the church if I like gay people? And I'm just astounded that any of those ideas would prevail. And I thought, well, let's do this for the entire ward. I reached out to Jena on social media. She was willing. We arranged a date. It's important to tell you that I took it to the ward council and I said, this is something I'd like to do. There are gay members of the ward, some who attend, some who don't, many of whom I have met with. Many Mormon LDS members have friends and family, and I think we ought to talk about it. And one of the persons I heard in Provo was willing to come and do it. Jena offered to bring a couple of people to make the arrangements to bring a group of people to speak. And the ward council, someone said, well, let's do it September 29th. I wanted to get it done earlier for other reasons. I think the other thing that I did, you may want to take note of, the stake president had a PowerPoint presentation. It was based and built around the church's website, 10 tips for parents, family, and friends of LGBTQ members. And embedded within and he'd also pulled in other material, specific quotations from addresses given in conference, given at BYU by Elder Quentin Cook and Elder Ballard. And it would have been 3 or 4 pages and run it all off. I pulled off all the quotes I had from Elder Quentin Cook and Elder Ballard and a couple of others, so it was on the front and back of a sheet of paper. So I could hand it out, and I handed it out to everyone sitting in the chapel to say, well, here's what some contemporary LDS church leaders say about the topic. If you don't like me bringing the topic up, if you don't like the fact that I brought a few people to talk to you about it, you know what? Here's what some of the authorities have to say. I found out there were 2 or 3 people who didn't like the fact that I invited these people to come, but the spirit of the time and the moment and the people who went up front and waited in line to talk to the 3 speakers suggested to me that the overall response by the ward was very positive. And I think Jena and Ann are probably a better judge of that. To do something like this in a ward, you're going to have a bishop who doesn't care what people say about him and says, if someone doesn't like it, I guess you can fire me. And we're going to do it because I think this matters. But I didn't just do it because the bishop said we're going to do it. I talked to the ward council about it and got their support. So that's my part until I want to jump in and say something else. I've thanked her, but Jena and Ann and Ben were wonderful. And it was great to have them there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, is it my turn?
It's
Do I
your
just
turn.
jump in?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's your turn, Jena.
Well, first of all, thank you, Bishop Briscoe and Dan. And it's great to see all of you, and it's great to see Ann also. That was a really beautiful Sunday for me personally. You know, I'll never forget walking into the chapel a little bit late. And I shared this in my Facebook post, but when I walked into the chapel, into sacrament meeting late, the spirit in that room was so strong. It was really a beautiful experience for me to not just be a teacher in that ward on that day, but to be somebody who could learn from the beautiful spirit and from the people in that ward also. So anyways, I just thought I would add that before I started to share my experience and the things that I share. I've done a few of these Fifth Sunday lessons, and but I'll share the remarks that I shared in this particular one, and what I have seen to be most effective. So typically what I like to do is I'll go in and introduce myself, and you know, I'll say my name's Jena Peterson, and I'm an openly gay member of the church. I've worked for years to embrace my sexual orientation as a gift from God, and as a really beautiful, important part of who I am. And it's really integrated into my identity and how I sort of operate in my life. After that, I share my gratitude for the bishop and for the ward for having us come. I really am so grateful to any ward who will open their doors to LGBTQ people to come in and speak and to share our stories and to share our hearts with them. I also ask the congregation to please be respectful of what we do share, because it is vulnerable, and it's not easy for us to share our hearts and to share our souls with people who we don't really know. That takes a lot of courage and strength on our part. And then the last thing that I usually ask before I get into my message is, you know, as a gay woman married to a man, I always please ask that people don't use my story as an example to force people into decisions that they would be uncomfortable with. Mixed orientation marriages can be difficult. While I honor mine, and I love my life and what I'm doing, it would be unfair for a parent to use my story with their child as an example of what they should do just because Jena Peterson can do it. So I always ask for that respect. I like to share the quotes from Elder Quentin Cook, and I'm just going to go ahead and read them here. Quentin Cook says, as a church, nobody should be more loving and compassionate. No family who has anybody who has a same gender issue should exclude them from the family circle. They need to be part of the family circle. Let us be at the forefront in terms of expressing love, compassion, and outreach to those. And let's not have families exclude or be disrespectful of those who choose a different lifestyle as a result of their feelings about their own gender. I feel very strongly about this. It's a very important principle. I also like to talk about the fact that, you know, if the human need is to feel loved and connected, and it is, then we need to do our best to provide that. And are we really doing our best in the gospel of Jesus Christ to provide that? And then I read M. Russell Ballard's quote, which we all probably have memorized by this point. When when he says, I want anyone who is a member of the church who is gay or lesbian to know I believe you have a place in the kingdom, and I recognize that sometimes it may be difficult for you to see where you fit in the Lord's church, but you do. We need to listen to and understand what our LGBT brothers and sisters are feeling and experiencing. Certainly, we must do better than we have done in the past so that all members feel they have a spiritual home where their brothers and sisters love them and where they have a place to worship and serve the Lord. So, how do we follow that counsel? How do we follow the counsel that the brethren have given us? I think this is important to talk to church members about, because some people don't know how. They don't really know what to do. And so I go over a couple of bullet points, and I let them know that we need to be a safe person. And in order to be a safe person, we need to soften our heart. We need to be willing to ask questions without an agenda. We need to realize that we don't have all the answers. If an LGBTQ person opens up to you and shares their story with you, we need to believe what they're saying, and don't have an answer, because oftentimes they're not looking for an answer. They just want to be heard and be believed. The other thing that we can do in order to follow this counsel is to love and support them in whatever their spiritual journey is. Their spiritual journey might have them stay in the church, and it might include leaving the church. And it is our job as members of the church to support that and to love them unconditionally and be patient with them and to honor what their agency is. I think it's important for members also to know that that when they engage in a conversation with an LGBT person, they can expect to be uplifted and enlightened, and that their heart will be softened towards the LGBT person. I can almost guarantee that members of the church can expect that. And I learned that lesson a long time ago, and it's something that Tom shared in the meeting that he and I spoke at Affirmation. And I have found that to be true, that members can look forward to that and hope for that. So after that, I'll usually share a personal experience about myself, and I won't do that tonight because of time. And but I do like to use the analogy of eye color, and I think this is really I feel like this is an easy way for members of the church to understand what it means when somebody comes out. And oftentimes we have viewed coming out as a defiant act in the past, that it's someone trying to be defiant or go against the church's teachings, when in reality it's just an act of somebody wanting to be seen and heard for who they are. So, if you take a family of 6 children and 5 of these children were born with blue eyes, the last child that's born into the family is born with brown eyes, and at a young age he starts to notice that he's different, and he doesn't want to be treated different, right? So he chooses to put in contacts to make it appear that his eyes are blue. And the reason why he does this is because it makes his life easier. He's able to conform a little bit easier. He fits in, and he knows that's just an easier life for him. And he trains his actions. He trains who he is to fit in. Well, later on in his life, it gets to be too difficult to hide that eye color, because all along he knows the truth of really who he is, and he doesn't have blue eyes. He really has brown eyes. And so when he decides to take those contacts out of his eyes to reveal his true eye color, and basically he's just wanting to show people who he is. He just wants to be seen. he wants to be believed for who he is, with somebody with blue eyes. And coming out as an LGBT person is very much the same as that. It's a very similar experience. I like to use the scripture in Ether. It's in Ether chapter 12, verse 27. And it says, "And if men come unto me, I will show unto them their weakness. I give unto men weakness, that they may be humble. And my grace is sufficient for all men that humble themselves before me. For if they humble themselves before me and have faith in me, then will I make weak things become strong unto them." I think if we look at that scripture and we ask ourselves, now what if the weakness is that we are unable to see God's children the way that God does? What if that is the weakness that we can apply to that scripture? How much better would we be individually and collectively as a church if we could collectively pray for that? Kneel in prayer to Heavenly Father and say, "Heavenly Father, I know that I don't see all of God's children the way that God does. That is a weakness of mine, and my hope and prayer is that that weakness can be turned to a strength." And then in closing, I always close with my testimony, and I would like to share a little bit with you as far as the delivery of the message. When people come to these meetings, they really remember how they felt rather than a lot of the content. And so that's why I know that for me, when I speak, and I know the same is true for Ann, when I speak at these, I try to really make sure that I am vulnerable and I bring in the Spirit and I share my heart with them, because that's where I feel like the change takes place. Is with the feeling rather than just the content. The two combined are ideal. In a Fifth Sunday meeting that Ann and I participated in not long after Bishop Briscoe's meeting, afterwards, and I had the same experiences with a couple of people in Bishop Briscoe's ward, where a young lady came up to me and she said, she was very emotional, and she said, "Jena, I was surprised to feel the Spirit in this meeting because I didn't anticipate that." And she said, "The Spirit told me that everything in this meeting was true, and I know that because that's how the Spirit communicates with me." And if that's what we can get people to feel and to have a change of heart, then our goal has been met. That we teach these people with love, and we teach them with showing ourselves to them. And so that's basically what I share. Like I said, I always close with my testimony, and my testimony is basic, and it is the same every time I share it, and it is that God is my Father, and He is your Father, and we have heavenly parents who love us unconditionally, and our heavenly parents want all of their children to return to live with them. And it is our responsibility as disciples of Christ to do our work in bringing all of God's children back to Him. And that Jesus Christ's atonement is applicable to all mankind. And that when we participate in these meetings, and when we extend our love and we extend our understanding, that is having faith in the atonement of Jesus Christ and how infinite that really is. And thank you for having me share these things tonight. And I will turn the time over to Miss Ann Peck.
Thank you, Jena.
I don't want to have to follow that. That was too great. Meeting over. Jena is wonderful and definitely one of my good friends. So when she called me up and invited me to come speak with her at this ward, I actually had to think about it for a little bit. I, being a transgender woman, I don't get all that many speaking opportunities. In my home ward, I'm somewhat limited on what I can participate in. And so speaking in Dan's and Bishop Briscoe's ward was somewhat terrifying for me because I believe there are discussions about gay people going on, but for the trans people, there's not much talk about that, and it's very foreign to a lot of people. So I was extremely terrified, but walking into their ward, I immediately felt that this ward was different and not like most wards in Utah. It was very diverse and all sorts of different types of people. And that was comforting to me, that maybe they might be okay with me there, and not only just be okay with them there, but actually speaking. I'll just give a really condensed version of what I say, but I talk about my story. Born and raised in Utah, born and raised in the church. Did everything I was expected of me. Deacon, teacher, priest, served a mission in London. Prayed, begged, pleaded for God to take this away from me, this feeling that I should be a woman. There was a lot of shame for me around that, and I didn't want it. I wanted to be just like everyone else. When that didn't happen, I became angry and bitter towards God, and eventually ended up leaving the church. And funny enough, when I started to transition is when I started coming back to church. At the time, Mormons Building Bridges had a program called Sit With Me Sunday. They had a list of people on their website, safe people. If an LGBT person wanted to go with, they could contact one of these individuals. And I think even there were a handful of wards that were listed as safe. And so I found a ward. Nobody knew who I was, and I went as myself. And that experience it felt like I was home. It felt like this is how it always should have been. And yeah, it hasn't been like smooth sailing. It's I try my best to be patient with other members of the church or church leaders who really don't understand, but I believe they're trying in their own way, and yeah, it might take a while. yeah, I really appreciate Bishop Briscoe for putting this on. It was an experience I'll never forget, and I know this is part of what God's plan for me is, and I say these things in His name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Ann. All right, thank you so much, Jena and Ann and Dan and Bishop Briscoe. I know for myself, I feel like when I hear these stories, like I'm on holy ground. I honestly do. I feel the Spirit so strongly. So now we can open it up for questions. If anybody has a question, if you want to direct it to one specific person, you can. Or if you want to just throw a question out there and let anyone choose to answer, you can do that as well. You can unmute yourself to ask a question by clicking on the microphone to the top right. If you'd like to show your and click the video icon, you can do that as well. It's up to you. Another way to ask questions is to type a message at the bottom right, if you'd prefer to do it that way. I guess while people are thinking about that, I had a question that I wanted to put out there for Bishop Briscoe. I was wondering, did your stake leaders, your stake president and such, know beforehand, and how would you suggest, if a bishop was watching this and wanted to do something similar in their ward, how would you suggest go about talking to the stake president and stake leaders about doing it?
I did not know that Dan Christensen sent an email to a member of the stake presidency until tonight. I did not tell them I was going to do it.
Okay. Okay.
Might be willing to do that.
Yeah.
My understanding is I'm the bishop and I counsel closely with the bishopric and with the ward council. And I told the bishopric about it. I said I had this amazing experience, this phenomenal meeting down in Provo. And one of the things that was discussed was talking to our ward members very directly about these issues. And I got a positive response from the bishopric, and I said, well, I'm going to put it on a ward council agenda. So I did. I would like to add, and I was struck by Jena's story. You know, I could read 25 books and I could preach sermons every other month or twice a month for 2 years and not get that young woman in the audience have the experience she had. They need to hear from gay and bi and lesbian and transgender Latter-day Saints. They need to hear from them and be able to be in the room with them and have the Holy Ghost confirm for them that they are made in God's image, that they have heavenly parents, a mother and a father in heaven who love them. And we can too. And we must too. And it's our privilege too. So I didn't ask. Maybe and what are they going to do? Fire me? Right? Then I got more time to go to more affirmation meetings.
Nice. I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Maybe every bishop doesn't feel that way. I mean, some of the bishops down in Provo said, so what do I do when people come and tell me I'm pushing a political agenda? I had one sister tell me I was playing politics. And I looked at I said, did you get the sheet of paper? I said, let's go read them again. Let's go read what Elder Quentin L. Cook said. Let's go read what Elder Ballard said to people at BYU at a general conference, what the church has on its own website. And these people outrank me. Okay? Their pay grade is far higher than my pay grade in terms of determining what policy is for the LDS church. So tell me where I crossed paths with the general authorities.
Thank you.
I might just be old enough. I might just be old enough. I don't care what people say about me.
Well, and can I chime in real quick?
Yes.
I think, you know, exactly what Bishop Briscoe said. This is really what gives us an advantage finally to be able to speak openly in our churches, because we do have the counsel from the brethren now, right? We have these quotes. They have actually come out and said this. And so it really helps us a lot. It's helped us more recently than ever before. So I think, yeah, exactly what he said.
That is helpful. I saw Jerry put a hand up, and then Carl.
Okay, I'm Jerry Chong from Calgary, from Canada, and most of you have probably seen what I've been writing on both affirmations and on my page publicly. So what I've been doing is I've been approaching my stake presidencies in Calgary, and over the last 4 years I've been able to sit down with 4 out of our 7 stake presidencies, and they've been very receptive. Part of it is my background. I've had callings where I've had interaction with leaders throughout the city, and so they've got to know me, and then I've had recommendations from my home stake president to other stakes in the city. And what that's done is it's allowed me to speak up and share your stories, share my stories, share your mom and dad's stories. And what I've found is by sharing these stories, it hits home with people that this is real, this is important. And we've been able to do bishop's training in 3 out of the 4 stakes. And in the 4th stake, I did an auxiliary-wide, stake-wide training meeting. And we talk about what it's like to be a member of the church and to be queer. And going back to Jena's comment about coming out, we come out because we want to be honest with Heavenly Father and with our Savior and with those around us. We come out because we trust people in our lives, and we also come out so we can be ourselves with you. And when I may be the oldest one in the room right now. So I've been coming out since I've been 21. So, you know, coming up to 40 years of coming out, and it does get easier. Sometimes it's funny. I've had a couple incidences where someone has said, I probably don't know anyone who's gay. And then it's like, well, let me fill you in a little bit more about me. And they're pleasantly surprised that I would be so open and trustworthy and transparent with them. And it's just made the dialogue in our conversations so much easier. So with that, I've been approaching the stakes to hold a fireside or an open forum. And what I've had is recently, back in May, I had a member of the Relief Society from a previous stake that I belonged to approach me about coming to speak to the sisters. And again, these meetings and these open dialogues take time. Some of these conversations, getting to a meeting, take anywhere between three months to a year. But when they happen, it's pretty sweet. And to have the undivided attention of 80 or 135 members, and again, going back to coming out, sometimes you forget who you know or who has moved into a ward or a stake, and it's always a pleasant experience to reconnect with people. Do you have any questions? Otherwise, I'll hand the time over to someone else.
Thank you, Jerry. Carl, did you have a question?
Yes. First of all, the question's for Bishop Briscoe, but first of all, I want to thank you for what you've done. You did something very brave, and you opened a door for us. I'm the president of the Affirmation Chicago chapter, and I see a lot of fruit from this conversation for what we could do here in Chicago as far as affirmation-wise. I want to start out by saying I've spoken just the last few weeks to a lot of bishops like you and a lot of branch presidents like you here in the Chicago area. And one of their biggest fears come from what will the Area 70 think and what will the stake presidency think? And my question is did you deal with anything after the effect that once we start holding gatherings like this in Chicago, because we are thinking of not only Fifth Sunday meetings, but also two family home evenings and just in general allyship trainings for ward councils. I'm wondering how you dealt with that like backlash and what I could possibly counsel church leaders when they have this fear of the Area 70 or the stake presidency coming to them. I know you said, well, what can they do? Fire me. But what kind of counsel should I give them? Because a lot of them are in their 40s. They're younger men than you, with some risk within the church. But they have the same testimony that you do. And I want to tell you, I've actually left the church and I've become Jewish. So your words have helped me and shown me a lot more than you maybe realize.
I think there are many like me in the church. My brother-in-law was in a bishopric in Bountiful where I was raised, which is not either the most backward, it's not the most progressive nor the most backward place to be raised in the church, somewhere in the middle. And his stake president told a gathering of bishops and bishoprics, I'm not looking to have, I don't want to see a whole bunch of people calling in gay people in their wards and excommunicating them. And that was 2 or 3 years ago when that policy came out saying it was anathema to, you could be gay, fine, but if you practiced it and lived with another person, your same gender, your same sexual orientation, then you could be excommunicated. He said, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in having a bunch of those meetings. I'm not interested in having a bunch of stake high councils in which we excommunicate a bunch of people. I think maybe I didn't contact the stake presidency because I thought they would be supportive. And I visited 7 weeks ago with the stake president and we discussed it, and I actually had a copy of the printout of the handout on my desk, and I handed it to him, and he asked me if I would email it to him. And on Sunday, he said someone had spoken to him about it in a positive way. So, I mean, being a politician, perception is reality. What people think is true is true. That doesn't make it true. You know, when they start quoting me stupid Old Testament scriptures that don't apply, and I say, okay, so you're LDS, correct? Yes. And you believe in modern prophets and modern revelation, right? Yeah. So do you think what Elder Ballard and what Elder Cook said is modern revelation? Do you think maybe this is an addendum, an update on stuff that people wrote 3,000, 2,000 years ago that maybe is more applicable to our lives today? I had one good friend who's an old vet who told me he wouldn't come back to church if he had to listen to more gay people speak. I said, I don't think you need to worry about that for a while. I said, but are you okay coming to church and sitting next to someone who is gay, but you don't know it because they haven't told you? And he really didn't like that question at all. But I liked it. So, because it's like, you know, how do you know that everyone, how do you know in the ward who's gay? I know some. I'm sure there are people in the ward who are that I don't know because they haven't told me yet. If you think there's going to be a political problem, if I were a bishop or a member of a stake presidency, if I were a bishop and I wanted to do something like this, I would find an ally in the stake presidency or someone I thought was closer to my position, and I would say, I want to have a conversation with you. I want you to tell me what you think would happen if I did this. Because I think my ward needs it. I prayed about it. It's important for everyone to understand that in this meeting, there was no discussion of politics. There was no discussion of the church's position on these issues. I passed out statements that were, and there's plenty of things to talk about, but I did it within the context of people who are LGBTQ, who are practicing members. I didn't bring in anyone who was going to be critical of the church. There's a place for people who want to comment on the church's policies. I don't think that's during a combined Sunday Priesthood Relief Society meeting. I think there's other avenues for writing and expressing your concerns. But I wanted a faithful meeting in which the Spirit was present, in which they could hear from people who have chosen to practice within the church and embrace who they are and be open and honest about it. And the fact that someone could come up and talk to Jena and say when Jena opened her mouth, she was ready to dismiss, but could not dismiss, and had the Spirit confirm to her that what she said was true, shows me I believe I made a decision that was good for the ward, that was good for the 3 individuals who spoke to us. It was good for me. I got a text message from a sister in California who moved last year, who still had a good friend in the ward, who said, hey, you should see it's too bad you weren't in church today. Guess what happened? She let me know she was bi. She let me know how she's married to a young man. She let me know how much it meant to her in California that I did that in Salt Lake. Some people had to be more careful with the political leadership and find someone you know and trust and say, help me talk through this about how you think we should or should not proceed. And then ultimately, sometimes you have to do things that are dangerous. I was arrested in front of the South African embassy in the middle 80s protesting apartheid. I was arrested. Someone paid my fine before I ever went. They'd arrested 300 people, including 3 congressmen that summer. But I still have my card. I had the right to remain silent. Anything I said could be used against me. Sometimes you have to take risks. But they're limited risks, and I didn't bring in people who are going to be critical of the church. If you bring in someone to speak like that, some authority is going to come after you, and maybe rightfully so.
Can I just add a couple things to that? Is that okay? Who's in charge?
Please do, Jena. Please do.
Okay. First of all, sorry, I feel like I'm talking too much, but I'll make it quick. But I really appreciate what Bishop Briscoe did say in the fact that I agree with him that it's really important that whoever a bishop brings into the ward to speak to them really needs to have a soft heart still towards the church, and their heart needs to be in the right place, or these meetings, they won't go well. So I would like to share, a couple weeks after we spoke in Salt Lake, we had another experience where after we spoke in Bishop Briscoe's ward, we had another experience where we spoke in a South Jordan ward. And we actually had a member of the stake presidency and a member of the High Council attend the meeting that me and Ann and Ben spoke at. So along the topic of having a stake presidency member there or not, we experienced both, where we didn't have a stake presidency member in Bishop Briscoe's, and then we had one in this other ward, because this particular bishop felt like he did want the stake presidency to know. And luckily the stake president was supportive in the meeting. And the feedback that we got after that particular meeting was that they loved it so much, and they're trying to get together a stake or a multi-stake fireside, because they really loved the spirit that they felt in that meeting. So again, the same thing as what Bishop Briscoe said. I think it just depends on who the stake presidency is, what the relationship is the bishop has with the stake presidency, but it's certainly possible either way. So
I'm wondering, has any of you had any experience with the Area 70s? Because I'm taking my presidency from the organizing perspective, and the 70s have a lot of like power in regards to more openings for LGBTQ people, especially in wards. And I've heard good stories of once the 70 met with someone who was LGBTQ, opening more doors within stakes and stuff. Maybe Bishop Briscoe, you could answer more to that, or maybe Ann and Jena, of how could we get Area 70s involved with this work? Because I think they're kind of key players in a lot of, I think, getting more LGBTQ visibility within the church.
Well, Carl, I'm happy, maybe we should take some of this offline. You're happy to email me. I can tell you one thing, bishops are too busy to go organizing Area 70s. We don't have the time. Although Tom Christofferson, who spoke at the affirmation meeting in which I first heard Jena, and can I just say in an aside that the stake president who spoke at that meeting said, you need to know two things about me. One, I'm LDS. Two, for 20 years, God has put gay and lesbian people in my life, and it's been a great blessing to me, and I didn't realize until recently why. And I was able to say the same thing, introducing these three wonderful people, that God has put a lot of gay people in my life that have been a great blessing to me. Elder Christofferson said, I'm going to quote a 70. Well, his brother's an apostle, so he runs around in a crowd that I don't run around in. And if you have those kind of contacts, I mean, I'm a politician. I know how to do that kind of thing. I'm not suggesting that that's how we organize. Maybe you have some insights I don't have. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm easy to find online. Just type Joel Briscoe, and I've got web pages and all kinds of stuff out there. I like Jena's response, which was a bishop who wanted his stake presidency to know he was doing it. Got a member of the stake presidency there. They had the same experience members of my ward have, which was the Lord is smiling on this. And why don't we get this in front of a bigger audience? That excites me. In fact, that gives me new ideas about things I can do with my stake president.
When I started coming back to church, I met with a couple different Area 70s, and they were more meeting with me to try and what they saw was correct my path of where they saw I was heading. So I don't think at the time they were very receptive. They were more just, I could tell they had their mind made up, and they did offer a lot of input to my bishop at the time on where I could go, what I could do. So, but it would be interesting to talk with them now, being a few years later, and kind of see if they're still, yeah. So that's the only interaction I've had.
Well, we probably have time for one more question if there's anyone who would like to ask one.
I can make a comment about Area 70s. Our stake president often reminds us we have more 70s in the stake than Cub Scouts because we live close to church headquarters, but we never we don't try to influence the church. Those leaders are separate really from our stake, and they don't even attend with us.
Well, Dan, they do go to the 20th ward or whatever ward it is. a lot when they're not on assignment. They don't come to the 13th ward, that's okay by me. If they want to come, that's great. I'm not going to do anything differently whether they come or don't. Until they tell me otherwise. But if you do an Area 70 who was, I mean, I did speak to an Area 70 about an issue 3 years ago because I knew his brother, who was a lobbyist on Capitol Hill, and my father was trying to do something with my son that I didn't like, and I did talk to him after a meeting because I knew him personally. I said, hey, just give me some advice here. But to pick up the phone and go, let's move this, let's get more stakes to do this. I don't know. I've never done that. I'm happy to, be able to work in the realm that I've been given a place to work in.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bishop Briscoe and Dan and Ann and Jena.
You're welcome.
Such a blessing to hear from you all. And thank you to everyone who came tonight and participated. This has been recorded, so it will be posted on Mormons Building Bridges, and it will be on YouTube. So if you want to share it with people, they can come watch it later. So, and also we will be having future online gatherings similar to this one. Every couple of months, hopefully, we'll be able to hear from some more people doing great things. So look for that. Everybody have a wonderful night.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everyone have a
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.